Dylan Gabriel is gone from Cleveland. Not maybe, not we'll monitor the situation. Gone. His name is already circulating in trade talks, and the return the Browns are looking at right now is so small it almost feels insulting to say out loud. A 2027 sixth-round pick, possibly a seventh tacked on as a consolation. That is the market's verdict on the man who was supposed to be stabilizing this franchise while they figured out what Shedeur Sanders actually was at the professional level. And look, I've been tracking this situation closely since last summer, so the outcome itself doesn't shock me. But the specific way this fell apart, the particular sequence of events that took Gabriel from bridge starter to trade chip, that's a story worth actually unpacking. Because this isn't just a depth chart adjustment. This is a case study in how quickly fortunes reverse in this league, and how one unscripted moment on a sideline can echo louder than anything you do between the white lines. So let me take you back to August 2025. Shedeur Sanders goes down with an oblique injury before the preseason opener against Philadelphia. He's out, which means suddenly, with zero competition in the room, Dylan Gabriel has the entire Cleveland offense to himself. No comparison to make, no rookie breathing down his neck, just him, the playbook, and a chance to stake a real claim in front of an entire fan base that was still figuring out how to feel about this quarterback situation. And honestly, he was decent. 13 out of 18, moved the chains, kept drives alive, nothing spectacular, but nothing embarrassing either. The kind of performance a veteran backup puts together when they've had time to prepare and the pressure is manageable. Controlled. Professional. Exactly the kind of outing that, in a different environment, might have actually built some positive momentum going into camp. But then he sat down for that sideline interview. And whatever goodwill he'd generated in the previous 60 minutes, he complicated in the next 3. He started talking about entertainers versus competitors. Said his focus was competing, said that was his whole mentality. Said it with this calm, almost philosophical delivery, like he was stating something obvious rather than throwing something pointed. And I remember watching that and thinking, there is absolutely no way anyone within 50 miles of Cleveland is missing what he's gesturing at here. Nobody needed a decoder ring. The entertainer with the podcast. The entertainer with the social following that most 10-year veterans would envy. The entertainer with a last name that carries cultural weight in an entirely different dimension than anything a fifth-round pick typically generates. Gabriel never said Shedeur Sanders. He didn't have to. The sentence wrote itself in every viewer's head the moment he used that word. What happened next is the part that I genuinely did not see coming. And I think it matters more than people have given it credit for. Because if Gabriel was expecting friction, if he was expecting Shedeur to respond with heat, to push back, to let the comment land and visibly affect him, he got the exact opposite. Shedeur Sanders absorbed that moment and essentially exhaled it. Said he talked to Gabriel on the flight home. Said he heard whatever explanation was offered and kept it moving. Said God had given him the capacity to be unmoved by other people's words. And here's the thing. It didn't read like performance. It didn't have that telltale quality of someone saying, "I'm not bothered," while clearly being bothered. It was structurally calm. The kind of settled, grounded response that only comes from someone who is so secure in their own identity that an outside comment doesn't even register as a threat. Shedeur Sanders heard those words, categorized them as irrelevant to his mission, and moved on. Because when you know who you are at that depth, noise stays noise. It never becomes signal. That exchange set the psychological backdrop for everything that followed. And now, sitting here in June 2026, watching the OTA reports come out of Berea, it's almost impossible not to see that August moment as the turning point. The moment when this story quietly pivoted toward the ending we're now watching arrive. Here's what I keep coming back to when I look at these spring practices. Football eventually tells the truth. You can craft your image. You can control your narrative. You can say every right thing in every interview and manage public perception with real precision. And then the pads come on, or even before the pads, in 7-on-7, in individual drills, in the accumulation of reps over weeks of organized team activity. And the filter drops, and the only thing visible to the coaching staff is performance. That's it, not reputation, not draft capital, not veteran experience. Just, what are you doing with the football, and how fast are you processing what's in front of you? And what Todd Monken has been watching all spring in Berea has apparently been difficult to contain. He's a first-year head coach who clearly understands that the last thing his program needs is a quarterback controversy eating his training camp narrative alive. So he's measured. He's deliberate with his language. He doesn't volunteer anything. He doesn't have to. And even with all of that professional caution, even working hard to stay non-committal, he cannot discuss Shedeur Sanders without something genuine slipping through the carefully constructed neutrality. He told reporters that Sanders has come miles from where he was at voluntary minicamp in April. Not steps, not noticeable improvement. Miles. That is not an accidental word choice. Coaches are precise people. When a first-year head coach who is actively trying not to crown his rookie quarterback still reaches for miles as his unit of measurement, that tells you something. That tells you the development rate is genuinely surprising him. And then there's what Mary Kay Cabot has been reporting from the field, that Sanders is absorbing the new scheme at a pace that's keeping the competition genuinely open. Not open as in, we'll give the young guy his reps and then hand the job to the proven veteran. Open as in Monken cannot bring himself to close the door on Sanders because he keeps watching things on the practice field that won't let him. That's an enormous thing to say about a rookie quarterback in June. That's not the language of managed expectations. That's the language of someone being genuinely outperformed. And then we get to the number that I think crystallizes this entire situation more clearly than anything else. Zach Jackson at The Athletic reported that in one of these 7-on-7 periods, Dylan Gabriel received 3 competitive reps. 3. Not 3 series. Not 3 drives. 3 individual reps in a 7-on-7 session. Think about what that number actually communicates without a single word being attached to it. Nobody in the organization issued a statement. Nobody called a press conference. But 3 competitive reps in a practice session is itself a statement, one of the loudest statements a coaching staff can make without opening their mouths. When a quarterback is being developed, when he's part of the real competition, he's getting meaningful reps consistently. When a quarterback is being managed toward a transaction, the reps dry up. The organization has already made its decision. What's left is just waiting for the phone to ring with the right offer. And when that offer eventually comes, the market is telling us what it'll look like. A 2027 6th-round pick, a potential 2028 7th thrown in if the acquiring team wants to sweeten the deal. That is the league-wide assessment of Dylan Gabriel's value in the summer of 2026. A pick from a draft class that hasn't even begun to be scouted. For the quarterback who 12 months ago was supposed to be this franchise's bridge to stability while they evaluated their long-term answer. I'm not saying this to pile on. I'm saying it because those numbers represent a genuine collapse in perceived value, and understanding why that collapse happened matters if you want to understand what's actually going on in Cleveland right now. The on-field record is part of it. 1 win and 5 losses as a starter, 937 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That is the statistical resume Dylan Gabriel is carrying into this competition, while Shedeur Sanders is in the same building, making a cautious first-year head coach reach for superlatives he clearly didn't plan to use. There is no version of this math that tips in Gabriel's favor. You cannot hold a 1-5 record and sub-1,000 passing yards over a rookie who is making your coaching staff quietly struggle to stay professionally composed when describing his development. At some point, it stops being a competition and becomes a formality, a conclusion that exists and simply hasn't been announced yet. What I think genuinely gets lost in the coverage of this situation is the correction that's actually happening right now in Berea. Because last season in Cleveland was not a meritocracy. Last season was political in ways that anyone paying close attention could see clearly. Deshaun Watson went 1-5 before a concussion finally forced the issue, and even after that window cracked open, even when the opportunity was physically sitting right there waiting, Shedeur Sanders was kept in a supporting role. He flashed, real flashes, meaningful ones, the kind you don't forget, every time a legitimate opportunity found him. But the franchise had so much of itself tied up in the Watson era, not just the money but the credibility, the narrative, the emotional investment in not having been catastrophically wrong, that acknowledging the pivot meant acknowledging too much at once. So they managed it. Gabriel got the reps that mattered while Cleveland kept losing, and the fans who were watching closely every single week understood exactly what was happening and exactly what it was costing them in the standings. Monken carries none of that. He arrived from outside the organization with his own standard, his own evaluation framework, and absolutely zero personal stake in protecting the decisions of the previous regime. When he looks at his quarterback room, he sees it without the distortion of sunk cost. He sees a veteran trying to prove his body has given him one legitimate run. He sees Talon Green, a rookie he personally drafted and is invested in developing on his own timeline. And he sees Shedeur Sanders, a player who, by every account coming out of those practice fields, is not behaving like someone still figuring out the NFL level. He is behaving like someone who was always supposed to be operating at this level, and the gap between his rookie potential and his actual current readiness is closing faster than anyone projected. That's what makes Monken's language so revealing. He's not managing expectations. He's reporting what his eyes are telling him. And what his eyes are telling him is making it hard to stay professionally reserved. The irony folded into the center of this whole situation is genuinely striking, and I've been sitting with it for weeks. The man who stood on that sideline in August and drew a philosophical line between entertainers and competitors, who positioned himself as the focused one, the serious one, the guy who was there to play football while someone else was there to cultivate celebrity. That man is now the one being shopped for a 6th-round pick in a future draft. He's the one getting 3 reps in a 7-on-7 period. He's the one whose trade value has contracted to the point where acquiring teams are essentially being asked to take on a rehabilitation project. And the entertainer he was gesturing toward without naming, that guy is in Berea right now making a first-year NFL head coach say his name like he's talking about someone special. I want to be clear. This is not a verdict on Dylan Gabriel as a human being. And it's not even a final verdict on him as a quarterback in every possible context. There's a path forward for him somewhere in this league. A backup role on a team that needs a reliable bridge option. A room that isn't this crowded with this much ascending talent at this precise moment. He has the experience, the football IQ, and the professionalism to contribute somewhere. But in Cleveland, in this specific room, with this specific rookie ascending at this specific rate, with this specific coaching staff watching what they're watching and choosing the words they're choosing, there is no remaining lane. He was the transitional quarterback. The transition is over. The bridge served its purpose. The destination is visible from where the franchise currently stands, and none of the coordinates on that map point toward Dylan Gabriel. Shedeur Sanders never needed to respond to that August interview. He had no platform ready, no cameras lined up, no moment staged for reassertion. He got on the plane, had a conversation, and went back to the only work that actually registers in this league. And when the spring came and the practice fields opened and the reps started accumulating in front of coaches whose job is to see clearly, he simply let the one thing that can never be spun do his talking for him. He made Monken's admiration structurally inevitable. He made the market for Gabriel contract. He rearranged the depth chart in Berea using the most direct method available, by actually being better week after week in front of the people who are paid to evaluate exactly that, without emotion and without agenda. That's the state of the Cleveland Browns quarterback room in the summer of 2026. Watson, attempting to demonstrate his body, has one real run left in it. Sanders making coaches choose between professional restraint and honest observation, and losing that battle in ways that are becoming harder to ignore. Green being developed carefully by a head coach who believes in patient construction, and Gabriel waiting for a phone call that ends this chapter and opens a new one somewhere else. Somewhere the introduction doesn't carry the full weight of a Philadelphia sideline in August, and where a fresh room might finally give him the space to become what Cleveland needed him to be before everything changed. He framed it himself: entertainers versus competitors. Said it like a declaration. Said it like he understood which story was about to be written and which character he was claiming. And looking back now, from the vantage point of everything that has unfolded between that sideline interview and these June practices in Ohio, it's hard not to see it as exactly that. A moment where he thought he was defining the terms of a competition and was actually just setting up the final scene of a story that had already chosen its ending. He defined the categories. He cast himself confidently. He just read the script wrong about which role belonged to whom.